What's up, guys? This is a video on ENFPs. So ENFPs are extroverts, intuitives, feelers, perceivers. Their functions are extroverted intuition, introverted feeling, extroverted thinking, and introverted sensing. ENFPs are basically souls that are forced to live in a human body. So I will make a distinction. There's the soul and then there's the body. The body has limitations, the soul does not. So the soul can love everyone perfectly. It has no gender. It is basically omnisexual. Okay, the soul can love anyone and everything. The soul is eternal, it has no bounds, it cannot be limited, and it has infinite creativity and free will and capacity to go anywhere and do whatever it wants. Now, unfortunately for ENFPs, they live in a body of a human being, and so they are oftentimes quite limited and frustrated with this idea that they do in fact have to live in their own body. So their body is quite limiting. Their body has a gender. Their body can only love one gender at a time if they want their body to be taken care of. They don't want to experience death, death of the spirit. Oftentimes ENFPs have a difficult time taking care of their bodies. A lot of them might be sexually ambiguous because they're much more in tune with their spirit than they are with their body. And human beings are basically spirits chained to a body. They're tethered, they're connected. We have a gender for a specific reason. We were given genders, unfortunately, for them. So ENFP does not like you to tell them what they are. They don't like you to tell them what they're capable of. They don't like it. They don't like destiny. They don't like anything that has to do with limitations. Okay, and because they are so in touch with their spirit and not necessarily the material world, they have a tendency to not be very practical and not be able to take care of themselves as well as, say, ISTJs and ISTPs and ESTJs and the ST types. So, and the SJ types, just sensors in general. ENFPs can be very loving and very affectionate. Oftentimes, I would describe them as wanting to experience everything. So if you've ever met an ESTP and an ENFP are basically the exact same thing, except inside out, except they both are good at what the other person hates. So ESTPs are strong-willed leaders and charismatic and aggressive. So are ENFPs, but they're never going to tell you that. They're never going to admit it. And then the ESTPs are likewise. They're very kind and compassionate and respectful and spiritually in tune. But they're not going to tell you that. They're not going to admit that because that's kind of like admitting weakness. Because they're practical and there are some issues with telling people these things in the real world that get in the way of practicality and making things happen. So ENFPs are leaders. They're big energy. They're big energy. They're leaders. They wanna conquer, but they're not going to call it that. They just like ESTPs, they're going to want to conquer and take over and be in charge and lead and stuff like that. But they're not going to call it that. They're going to call it unity and harmony. Okay, they're going to call it harmonizing. Okay, now ENFPs are going to tend to, if you've ever lived in Boulder, Colorado, or Seattle, Washington, that's basically where you're going to find ENFPs. You're going to find them in the health capitals of the world, of the United States, shopping at Whole Foods, cooking organic meals, with herbs and all that kinds of stuff. Oftentimes they do this. When they're more developed, they start to take more of a taste in getting in tune with their bodies. So a lot of ENFPs will actually start to get into things like yoga and Tai Chi and dieting and massage therapy and things that are really in tune with the spiritual aspects of the human body. They will definitely they eventually develop a fascination for getting in tune with their bodies and what that means. They can be hard workers. They can be extremely hard workers and dedicated, but it requires them to. But that is only after they get in touch with their bodies and learn to accept their bodies and take care of themselves. Let's see. ENFPs are going to be. They're usually very inspirational. They're going to be personalities like. They're going to be people like. Let's see. What are some examples? I know a lot of ENFPs work in the clergy, or the ministry, or any kind of spiritual anything. So that's basically ENFPs. They don't. What they're very good at is seeing something and all the different ways it can be interpreted. Because they have this very spiritual existence, they see everything in its limitlessness, in its eternal form. They see everything in its eternal form. So when they look at people, they see the person's unconscious behaviors and spiritual. They see the spirit of the person and not so much the personal drive. They can oftentimes be very smothering in relationships. They can be very kind and compassionate, but some of them will oftentimes take care of the partner because they secretly need the partner to take care of them, and this can become incredibly smothering and suffocating to their partner. While at first it may seem like it's enjoyable, it's not actually. While this may seem at first a good thing, it's not. At first appearance, they're oftentimes they may appear very humble, very gentle, and stuff like that. But this is once again not necessarily being in tune with their bodies. They are actually quite aggressive and quite cold when they're fully developed and calculating. Okay, but they're not going to tell you that. Okay, because that would get in the way of you viewing them the way they want to be viewed, which is as this more spiritual being. So not only that, but ENFPs generally, like I said, they hate destiny. So if you tell them this is where your life is going to end up, they're going to do everything they can to prove otherwise to you and to themselves. This is usually just an unhealthy characteristic. Now, ENFPs, because they're so impractical, because they're not in touch with the practical side of life, they generally will, deep down, their insecurities, they may feel unintelligent. And so because of this unintelligence, they don't actually feel certain about anything in the real world themselves. Anything that has to do with practicality, they're not certain about it. Okay, and so because they're uncertain, they will do their best to look certain, and as a result, they can oftentimes come off when they're unhealthy. They can become very lying. They lie and manipulate and manipulative. They basically become liars when they're unhealthy because they're insecure about themselves. They don't believe that, because they're out of touch with reality, but they're surrounded by people in reality. In order to compensate for this and to kind of fit in, they're going to oftentimes develop a level of assertiveness it's an unhealthy assertiveness. It's an assertiveness that it's a lie. It's not true. They're going to claim to know things that they don't actually know. They're going to claim to be authorities on things and claim to be much more knowledgeable and wise than they actually are. When it comes to spiritual matters, they're very competent, but when it comes to spiritual matters and even psychology, they're very competent. They're very good at human psychology. But when it comes to practical matters and understanding things in the world, the way things work and things like that, not so much. That's not their strong suit, and that takes time to develop down the road. And so any kind of rigid systems or rigid ways of thinking, they're going to generally stay away from, or they're going to convince themselves otherwise. So they're most compatible with the ISTJ, and they are least compatible with the ISTP. The ISTP is going to appear to be extremely rigid to them and limiting, and they don't like that. And the ISTJ is going to help them get in touch with their bodies. Now, the ENFP has a very top-down way of top to bottom way of thinking. They're going to perceive the universe before they perceive the individual. And so, because of this top-down way of thinking, they're going to generally kind of have this feel. They can sometimes be rather megalomaniacal, but this top-down way of thinking narrows things down. I want you to imagine there's like a blanket over the universe, and they see all of it at all times. They see all of it at all times, and they see all of its imperfections. And a lot of times, ENFPs are trying their best to be morally perfect. They're trying to be perfect, and it pains them to admit that they are imperfect. And personal growth for the ENFP starts by admitting that they are in fact imperfect, and it's okay, and they're okay, and that's how it's supposed to be. And then once they come to that, once they realize that imperfection, and then they can start growing towards true perfection. That you can only grow by recognizing your flaws. So that's pretty much all I got. That's ENFPs. See you later.